Thank you for having me here today. I'm just going to talk about grazing basics, not so much detail of our farm and what we're doing, but more just what you need to think about if you're interested or if you're talking to someone about taking on rotational grazing or a more intensive form of grazing of any sort. First thing to do is set your goals. You need to know where you want to go. Charmaine just talked about her goals, what they want to do, but you need to start off with a clear end in mind. Don't start off thinking, I'm going to do this, it'll get me somewhere. Where is the question? So think about what you want to achieve. How many animals have you got? What are your soil and pasture systems? Are they adequate for where you want to go? How are you going to provide water? In my experience, that's the biggest single cost, is providing water. Are your existing facilities adequate for your goals? And so you might have to do more fences, more yards. And do you have a plan in place to upgrade all those systems that might prove inadequate? On our farm, we went from 5 paddocks to 63, but still the water was the most expensive thing we had to do. And I live near Clare, and that's 20-inch rainfall where I am. And in world terms, I live in the desert too, so don't be insulted that people have said that today. So we all start off with a set stocking system pretty much, and I've worked right through the mid-north for the last 30 years, and everyone pretty well set stocked in those days. Are you going to go to rotational grazing? Do you want to go to one where you spend 20 days in each paddock? I would strongly recommend against that because, as Charmaine said, you've got to look at the plants. You've got to understand what your plants are doing. And 20 days, you would all know, growth at this time of year is very different from growth in perhaps April. So you have to be aware of a lot more aware of the seasons than you perhaps have been. And it doesn't matter if you've got different sized paddocks, you just adjust the amount of time your sheep are going to spend there. And there's two things that are always the same. You have to think about your carrying capacity and your stocking rate. Does anyone know their carrying capacity? One. If you don't know that, I mean, a lot of people run what their father ran or what their grandfather ran. They've just done the same thing forever. Well, I'm sorry, but that doesn't work. You're probably overstocked. You need to adjust it each year to what's happening that year. And that might mean you have a sacrifice mob. You might have to run a mob of wethers that you want to get rid of. You can get rid of when it doesn't rain. You might decide that you can get rid of your lambs early. You have to think about those sort of things. And how much are the animals going to eat? Does anyone have any idea how much a sheep eats every day? It varies a little bit. I'll come back to that, but no? A sheep will eat approximately 1 kilogram of dry matter a day. Now that's quite a lot. And if you think about a ewe with a couple of lambs, no wonder she struggles to keep up often if she's got twins. But it depends on the quality of the forage. You know, when things are really green, they don't have to eat as much. When they're on stubbles, they have to eat a lot more. So think about that. Think about how much feed you've got in front of you. Using the charts like Charmaine does is a really helpful tool, but it's not for everybody. It's very difficult. You've got to get your head around a lot, don't you, Charmaine? Yes, you can. And you can also get special computer programs now that do it. But you need to think about that, how much your stock are going to eat. You need to learn to assess your pastures, how much is in front of you. And this time of year, you're looking at how much you're going to have in April, because you're just at the end of the growing season, probably in the next few weeks. How are you going to keep those sheep fed all summer into autumn next year? Think about that, because you might want to get rid of some early. You might want to buy some feed in now or as soon as harvest happens, so it's a bit cheaper. But those are things you have to think about. You can't just do nothing and think about it when it's a disaster. If you look at that, the stocking rate of both paddocks, you've got 100 animals in a paddock for a day, or you've got 1 animal for 100 days. It's the same stocking rate. You'll have a very different effect on the paddock. That one animal can do a lot of damage because it'll go and eat everything that it really likes and leave everything else, and it will help you get more and more weeds if you do that. Charmaine's talked a lot about water. As I said, that was our biggest issue. It's very expensive to do. I think we spent $120,000 10, 20 years ago. I hate to think what it would cost us now, but you really need to have lots of water, and it's not so much you have to have big troughs, you have to have a good supply coming in so the trough is never empty, otherwise the sheep panic. And you certainly don't want it looking like that around the watering point. You want to make sure that you try and keep the erosion to a minimum. And you've got to manage your total grazing pressure. It doesn't matter where you are, you're going to have problems with kangaroos. We have deer, the odd rabbit, not many now, and certainly in some areas goats. They're a big issue. You need to count them into your stocking rate. You need to make some allowance for them because you're never going to get rid of everyone. You have to be practical about that. By all means, keep on top of them if you can, but remember you probably won't because they'll move in from everywhere else. And this is probably for all farmers, and I've worked with a lot of farmers in the last 25 years. Keeping records is something that nobody wants to do. And it's really, really important to keep records because if you don't keep records, how can you know if you're getting better or if you're going backwards? It's not hard to do. There's lots of programs on computers that can help you. There's bits of paper. There's lots of ways of doing it, but you need to understand that how much you're taking out, what's going back in to your pastures, and you've got to allow for seasonal variations in weather, and you've got to look at the general health of your pastures. So I know it's hard, there's lots of ways of doing it, but you must do it if you want. I mean, you've got to set goals. You know I know in our country how many tonnes of grain we produce. We know last year was better than the year before or the year before that. So you have those records with cropping. Not many people will do it with their animals, and it's really important. I just can't emphasise that enough. And you want to manage to increase your perennials. Your perennials will give you the stability in your pastures. You'll still have something there in autumn. I mean, your annuals come and they go, and they come and go quite quickly. Perennials will give you that opportunity they'll regrow if there's any rain during the summer. They'll be there this year, next year, and I think they say they last about 70 years, some of these, and maybe even longer. So if you look after them and encourage them by grazing to give them this rest that they need time to regrow their roots after they've been grazed, because that's where their storage is to get the growth going again. So you need to think about that and try and work for them. And it's not just grasses, it's shrubs as well. And look after those things. That's what you need to monitor if you're going to monitor anything. And avoid overgrazing. I've seen so much of this. I think we all have. You'll end up with everything going wrong. All the things we talked about today, all these people who talked about the soils, and that's what you're going to do the damage to, and it takes a long time to recover. So if you have to sell some sheep, sell and regret. If it rains again, you will, but sell. Don't hang on and hang on and hang on and think it's going to rain tomorrow. I think we've all made that mistake. That's what started me on this journey. In 1982, we had the worst year we've ever had, and we hung on too long. And then we had to sell sheep I think we shot them in the end, even in 1982. We certainly did in 1990. And we just left things in a real mess. We were lucky. We got a big rain in February, and that's when I saw native grasses coming on our property. And from then on, we thought, well, okay, what are these things that can survive a drought like that and still work for us? So that's where we went. But don't do it if you can possibly help it. Sell and regret. And monitoring. You must monitor your plants. You really need to look at the ones you want, not the ones you don't want. That top paddock looks like it's really good, and that was taken over at Buckleboo last year. Looks fantastic. Looks like there's lots of feed there. But in actual fact, that bottom plant there, that's what they were doing to anything that had any green. And those plants are really going to struggle to recover. So go and walk across your paddock. Learn what your desirable plants are, and don't worry about the weeds. I mean, everyone focuses on weeds, but don't worry about what's happening to them. Worry about what's happening to the ones that you really, really want, and look after them, and you'll get rewarded. And if there isn't enough feed in your paddock, you're either overstocked or you haven't had enough rest. And the other thing which I find people don't do anymore is get out and walk. Get out and actually look at what's happening on the ground. Don't look at photographs, don't look at your things from the satellite. They're fine, they're a good tool, but at the end of the day, you've got to look at what's happening in the paddock. What's being grazed, what isn't. where are they grazing? In our country, we've got a lot of hills, and they graze on the north face and not on the south face. If I looked at the south face all the time, I'd think, oh, there's heaps of feed. But on the north face, they sit there, they feed, they sit in the sun. They really like the north face. It must be sweeter grass. So I have to monitor on the north face, not on the south face. And eventually I'm going to divide them all off, but that's a little while away. So remember to go and look at the ground. If you're doing a grazing plan, just remember, be flexible. Things change throughout a year. You have to plan ahead, you have to monitor, and then you have to adjust your plan if it's not working for you. Never be afraid to adjust it. You can come up with something different, try something different. It's not easy. There's lots of experiments in this game, and it's really, really hard. You have to know your country and do what's right for your country. What I might do on my land is different to what you would do, is different to what someone in the southeast would do. So remember, it's you and your place, and you want the best for it, so work towards it. It's a juggling act. You've got all these balls in the air, you've got to get them right. It's not hard once you know what you're doing, but you do have to think about it. You do have to get all those things right, and it'll take you probably years to do that, but it's worth trying because it will reward you, as Charmaine's finding, as we've found, I think as Cole's found. You really get what you put into it, you get it back out, you'll have better sheep, you'll have better pastures, you'll have healthier soils, and it all works together as we've learnt today. So thank you very much.